Episode 1 of Mobland begins with a tense scene, immediately setting the tone and mood of this crime thriller. The relationship between the Dogan and Lazarus families goes back more than 3 decades, but things are tense between the current heads of both families. There's been a fallout between them, and trying to broker a peaceful resolution here is Harry de Souza, a representative that works on behalf of the Harrigan family. While the two do reluctantly agree to shake hands, they outright refuse to apologise, putting Harry in a difficult position. Conrad Harrigan, the man overseeing the gangs on his turf, is in a sticky position. Realising that his peace broker is only a temporary stopgap rather than a permanent solution, he has Harry shoot both gangs dead. Problem solved. While the adults seem to be in control, the same can't be said for their wild child children. Eddie Harrigan is Conrad's grandson, and he swings his family name around like a weapon, doing whatever he pleases with whomever he wants. His current friend happens to be Tommy, who's the son of Richie Stevenson and Conrad's biggest rival in London. Eddie and Tommy head out clubbing together, where Eddie abuses his power, going so far as to stab a kid called Huey in the middle of a club. Outside, he's reunited with Tommy once more, who's certainly spooked after the stabbing and curses his friend out for being crazy. Eddie throws a knife in the Thames and heads off, but Tommy's movements from here onward, however, are unclear. At the Harrigan estate, Conrad receives a visit from his brother Archie. They reminisce about their past after Maeve makes some snidey remarks to Archie, mistaking him for his dead brother, whom she was sure was killed. Some light foreshadowing maybe? The Eddie situation is quite the headache though, especially as this isn't the first time he's gone round stabbing kids. Harry shows up at the house to mediate, and he certainly doesn't beat around the bush here. He implores Eddie to work with him, otherwise he could face 5 to 10 years behind bars, regardless of his family connection. Unlike his father Kevin, it seems Harry actually has the balls to talk straight with the kid, and Eddie responds accordingly. Eddie reveals details about the club, although he fails to reveal he was with Tommy that night. Harry soon then asks around and finds out that the kid's full name is Huey Campbell, who's currently at the Homerton Memorial Hospital nursing his stab wound. Along with deleting the CCTV footage from the club, Harry also uses his contacts inside the police station, a guy called Liam, and someone from inside the hospital to gain access to Huey. Harry pays the guy a visit and reminds Huey that he wasn't stabbed by Eddie. Not really anyway. As a side note, it's actually quite ironic that the sign above Huey's head reads no sharps. Anyway, Harry continues on, threatening Huey until he plays ball. While the earlier gang problem was resolved with threats and subsequent deaths, the same can't be said for this one. Richie is hassled by his partner Ron to go looking for Tommy, given he hasn't shown up back home for a while. Richie soon starts to stitch everything together, learning that Tommy was hanging out with Eddie that night. Richie rings Kevin next, threatening war if Tommy's not back by the end of the day. While Harry is very adept at his job, the same can't be said for his family life. He's got a rocky relationship with his wife Jan, whom he seems to be arguing with a lot. Their daughter Gina is caught in the middle of this and tries to play the mediator, but it's clear there's a lot of unresolved drama here. Jan is desperate for them to go to therapy and iron out their issues, but Harry is loath to do that. He flat out refuses to even discuss their current issues, but eventually he does concede, telling Jan just to book it in and he'll work around it. But I think Jan knows he's probably just trying to shut her up and get back on with work. That much is especially apparent because he's got more pressing matters to deal with. Harry scrambles to resolve the Richie situation before things properly kick off. Eddie isn't exactly forthright with info, and Conrad decides they should organise a meet at Moody's boxing gym that night to try and straighten things out. Now, Moody's gym appears to be mutual ground here for the gangs that need to resolve pressing issues. Moody makes a tidy mint of this, mediating the leaders by forcing a 50k deposit and all phones to be handed over. He has some pretty strict rules, including no threats, and the implication here being that any bloodshed results in Moody keeping that 5k. Richie and Harry are the only ones inside the gym for the time being, but of course both have their men stationed outside. Harry gives instructions to sniper these goons if Conrad gives the message to do so, and thus the meeting goes ahead. The crux of the issue here stems from Richie demanding to talk to Eddie about what happened to Tommy, otherwise there will be drama. This gives Harry until noon the next day to sort everything out, otherwise things will escalate. Bringing Conrad, knowing that a war is imminent if Tommy doesn't show up, he hesitates in pulling the trigger and ending this before it begins. Maeve eventually encourages her husband to wait, believing this is the wrong place and wrong time to kill Richie. That night, Conrad's daughter Serafina shows up at the estate with Brendan. Maeve clearly doesn't like her, this isn't said, but perhaps she's an illegitimate daughter, while Kevin also rocks up too, although Eddie is obviously not here. The family lawyers are apparently also in attendance for this meeting as well, as Conrad lays out what they've been doing. Now, current rumours flying around the Harrigan gang is that the old man has lost his touch, given Richie has moved in and managed to secure a lucrative deal of fentanyl with the Mexicans. Fentanyl is the big business venture right now that the gangs are looking at, but all of this was actually part of Conrad's master plan. He knows the Mexicans are completely unpredictable, and the plan here was to let Richie move in and then lowball a better offer to the Mexicans once they've taken out Richie, and thus no more competition in the field. However, there's a problem. Maeve speaks to Conrad outside and informs him that Archie is actually a mole, given he's been working with Richie all this time to broker a better deal for himself. She encourages him to test Archie, and unfortunately he fails the test. Conrad shoots him dead, but he's clearly rattled by this, shaking off Maeve's touch in the hallway and heading upstairs, which is where episode 1 of Mobland comes to an end. Episode 2 of Mobland begins with Harry looking over the aftermath of Archie's death and working to clean the place up. He also learns about what went down from Kevin, who's just as shocked as anybody over what transpired. As we soon learn from flashbacks, Harry and Kevin actually go way back. They met in prison, and since then they've had a pretty close bond. This is also how Harry managed to get into working with the Harrigan family, although this line of work obviously has taken its toll. That night, armed police raid Harry's place. He's put in handcuffs and arrested, but he goes willingly, and he doesn't fight it. He knows that O'Hara, the lifelong Harrigan lawyer we saw briefly last episode, will get him out in a few hours. The detective here is a guy called Fisk, and he tries to offer Harry a lifeline, reinforcing that the Harrigan reign is coming to an end, and asks questions about Archie's death. In the morning, Richie shows up and corners Kevin on the road. He demands to know where Tommy is, but gets nowhere. So Richie decides to give him an hour to get his house in order. When the cars leave, Kevin brings Bella back home and decides Eddie needs to be moved to the Cotswolds. He's sending 2 of Harry's men over to facilitate this move. While on the move, a big chase ensues around the country roads as Richie intends to grab Eddie as collateral. Thankfully, they manage to get Eddie back to Conrad's estate in one piece, but it's definitely touch and go for a while. O'Hara shows at the station and gets Harry out here, but it would appear they have a mole in their midst. O'Hara and Harry know that there must be a reason for the police, and in particular Fisk, moving on Harry and asking damning questions. O'Hara believes the culprit could be Maeve, but without evidence and just finger pointing, they decide to do some digging rather than just pulling the trigger and repeating Conrad's spectacle from the previous night. However, rattling Harry is actually part of the police's plan. They know that Harry will be on the hunt for the informant, and through him they can figure out exactly who that is, given it appears they only have anonymous tips to go on. Brendan shows to see his half-sister Serafina with a big proposition, but she doesn't want to hear it. He fumbles his words and she eventually tells him he doesn't have the stones for this line of work, encouraging him to leave. O'Hara and Harry show up at the estate after, with Conrad believing they need to retaliate against Richie. For now, Harry speaks to Conrad outside, bringing up the incident with Fisk and the police that morning. Harry promises to look out for him and find proof about Archie allegedly being a grass, but Conrad is also regretful over killing his brother, now reflecting that he probably should have cut his tongue out instead. Harry heads up to see Eddie and brings up that he knows from the CCTV that he was with Tommy that night. He eventually spills the beans, and those 2 posh kiddies in a taxi at the start of episode 1 are Alfie King and Jack Wiley. They're from Westminster, and that sends Harry out to try and calm things down with Richie. Harry shows up at the bar to see Richie, but he's not in the mood to play games. He tries to facilitate this as best he can, but Richie soon threatens Gina. Sporting multiple pictures of her at school and a twisted story involving Burger King, he shows that he's not messing about. He wants Tommy back, and with Gina's life on the line, it causes Harry to spiral. All of this is not helped by things at home being so fragile and tenuous, with Jan contemplating seeing a solicitor and potentially divorcing her husband. She soon cottons on that Gina is not safe, especially when Harry mentions Tommy has gone missing. But Harry lies to her and claims that everything is fine, but of course it absolutely is not. Harry next arrives to see Isabella, Kevin's wife. Now, earlier in the episode we saw her speak to her father, who happens to be a minister in the government, attempting to broach a deal with a French businessman called Antoine. There's certainly no love lost between him and his daughter, as evidenced by snidey remarks about her age. Bella is attempting to leverage this deal, but the timing is awful. It's also clear that she has the hots for Harry too, encouraging him to join her in the hotel room that he wants her to stay in. He refuses, of course, but it's unclear if they have a history together or not. They may have had an affair, but it's not initially clear if that's the case. For now, Harry heads off to see Jack and Alfie. They bring up what they know regarding the club, but it's clear they're not 100% about the specifics with Tommy. At the estate, Maeve speaks to Eddie and brings up that she's been raising him all this time. She claims that he's a proper Harrigan and reinforces that she made everybody everybody in the house. Conrad though reinforces that she's only the prosecution, that Eddie is a toe rag and he's the actual judge here and makes the final decisions. But for how long, I wonder? With time of the essence, Harry shows up at the club where a Prodigy track is playing again. It was Firestarter in episode 1 and this time it's Breathe. Any chance of Smack My Bitch Up or Voodoo People in the episodes ahead, do you reckon? Anyway, Harry immediately starts fighting, demanding to know where Tommy is as he confronts the club manager. He sends Harry down to the basement where the truth about Tommy is unveiled. It turns out he's been killed and stuffed into a box, which is where episode 2 of Mobland comes to an end. Episode 3 of Mobland starts with a huge explosion, blowing Kevin's house sky high. Harry receives a call from Kevin afterwards, warning that Richie has made his move and he's coming for them. Harry wants Kevin to meet him down by the yard and to bring Eddie with him, now that he's found Tommy's body. Over at Harry's place, Richie's goons show up and threaten him. However, he's on speakerphone with Conrad, and given he knows exactly who these two are, he threatens to blow them off the map if they make their move. It's enough to spook the goons into staying quiet and pretending that they haven't actually seen anything. Harry next heads off to stay with an old mate called Mike, but the guy's not particularly happy about this. As we soon learn, he's a sports journalist and author, but also a degenerate gambler who owes Harry 30 grand. So there is that too. Gina and Jan are going to be staying on Mike's boat for the time being, while Harry tries his best to clear up this mess. Harry meets with Eddie and Kevin afterwards down at the yard. He shows them the club owner, Valjean, beaten and tied to a chair. He's in a rough way, and they also have Tommy's remains here too. According to the owner, Eddie asked Valjean to take care of Huey in exchange for 10k. But on top of that, he was also told to bring Tommy and Eddie back to the club together. Tommy was killed when he returned though, having been stabbed between 50 and 60 times. Eddie though was nowhere to be seen. Kevin is livid, and with a taser in his hand, he confronts his son, shocking him several times. Whether Eddie's actually telling the truth here when he says he doesn't know what's going on is unclear, but Kevin is undoubtedly irate. Kevin rings Conrad to let him know what's happening, but Maeve is in the room circling. When she finds out what's happened, she's the only one here who smirks. She's actually proud of Eddie's actions and wants Conrad to echo the same sentiment, but instead he hangs up to discuss this with her further. The pair head to the sauna, which appears to be the room they go to talk shop like this. It may also be a way of doubling precautions in case the house is bugged. They contemplate how to handle the Richie situation. Maeve suggests going after Vron and using her as leverage, while Conrad has plans to arm everybody and go after Richie's inner circle. Maeve refers to herself as the White Queen here and reinforces that she's always been a player in this game, but it's clear that things are picking up in a big way regardless. In the middle of all this, Harry shows at the care home where he promised Maria, his maid, that he'd help get her mum someplace nice to live out her days. He arrives late to the scheduled meeting though, so he puts on the old bribing hat and knows this will do the trick. On the way out the door though, he spots an old man at a table. Harry recognises him as a violent prison guard that used to beat him when he was behind bars. Harry doesn't act on this, but it is indicative of his troubled history with the authorities. Unfortunately, his pictures are also snapped when he leaves the house. Back at the shipyard, the Czechs have shown up to bolster out Kevin's forces. Kevin though is more interested in what's happening with Isabella, knowing something is going on here. Now, Isabella facilitates the meet between her father and Antoine, and we already know she's not happy in her marriage, something echoed by Kevin's concerns when he mentions that she didn't even flinch after being told about the house being bombed. It's clear that she's working in the shadows to broker a deal here, potentially to leverage herself into a position of power. However, I think it's safe to say that she's more determined to take her dad down a few pegs, given there's no love lost between them. Within the meeting, there's an implication that Bella's dad is prepared to broker a secret deal, evidenced by him saying, "I can get you in to see anyone you want for the proper consideration." The entire incident is being filmed by a secret camera that Bella has set up with Antoine. However, he decides to hold on to it and make a copy for insurance, essentially blackmailing Isabella into submission so she'll play ball. Back with Harry for now, he and Kevin look set to kill Valjean, but they both play the good cop bad cop routine to force him into submission and work with them to save his own family, specifically giving them crucial time to come up with a better plan of action while Richie is on the warpath. Eddie shows back up at Conrad Conrad's estate here, where there's clearly no love lost between him and Serafina. Brendan is here too, just mulling about, and while they all discuss Eddie's antics, Maeve waltzes into the room humming and praising Eddie's actions. She also throws shade at Serafina too, although she bites back by pointing out Maeve married into the family, so it's not exactly like she has a leg to stand on here, by claiming that she's not a true Harrigan. Conrad heads out with Serafina just as things start to get spicy. We do get confirmation of an affair here, which Serafina is the result of, while it seems this all occurred a long time ago and Serafina's birth mum is no longer in the picture. Interestingly, Maeve was 16 at the time Conrad got her pregnant with Brendan too. Serafina has her head in the game though, more so than Brendan, and asks outright whether Eddie killed Tommy. She knows this is enough to make Richie move and start this war, but Conrad puts on the facade of still being in control. Harry rings Richie next and breaks the bad news to him about Tommy. The idea here is to set up Valjean as the fall guy, while also getting the cops off their back in the process with a little car switcheroo gig to fool the officers. Kevin, having switched cars with Harry, taunts the officers when they're far enough away. However, the cops do receive an anonymous tip about Archie Hammond's body, which they dig up from a casket. Elsewhere, Harry hands over a bloodied Valjean to Richie. He's prepared to torture this man within an inch of his life to find out whether his fabricated story is actually the truth. If not, well, Harry is going to hear from Richie very soon. Speaking of calls, Harry receives one from Bella here, who brings him over to her hotel room. She admits she messed up and breaks the news about the blackmail incident. Harry promises to take care of it, but there's a moment here where he contemplates kissing her. He doesn't. When Harry leaves, he knows that things are going to pick up in a big way from now on. Episode 4 of Mobland starts with Harry showing up to see Antoine. After a bit of light threatening, the Frenchman hands over the memory card and the copy he has stashed away. Antoine doesn't know who he's dealing with though and attempts to bribe Harry with £40,000. It works about as well as expected, given Harry's loyalty to the Harrigans, and he leaves after slamming the cash back in the guy's mouth. Harry next shows up to see Jan and Gina on the boat. She's not particularly happy about him constantly working, but Gina knows this line of chatter and hurriedly puts her headphones on. As for Harry, he recaps what happened in the first 3 episodes, but Jan hits back, explaining that she has 3 dislikes here, and that includes not knowing what's happened across the show. She's content with her small corner of this life and has accepted what Harry does, but under the agreement that he tells her nothing. She also wants to go back home, and Harry eventually concedes with her wishes. Conrad receives a call informing him that Archie has been found. The thing is, only 2 people seem to know where he was buried, Conrad and Harry. Conrad is adamant there must be someone else, but of course Maeve convinces him that Harry's the mole, and it just makes the entire drama that much more tense. Harry shows up to see Kevin here, where they're both twiddling their thumbs and hoping for the best. They've heard nothing from Valjean, but someone called Donnie shows up to the garage looking for Harry. He seems to know who Zosia is too, and when Harry finds out about this guy, he shrugs it off too and doesn't know him. Turns out the guy is actually a warning from Maeve and Conrad, who have both Harry and Jan tailed. Over at the yard though, Kevin and Harry discuss old times, and specifically the nasty prison guard we saw glimpses of last episode. His name is Rusby, but Kevin claims it doesn't ring a bell. However, he has secrets of his own. Turns out Bella used to come by the house and Conrad slept with her a few times. Maeve was the one who let him know, and Bella confirmed the story when asked. They met at Cheltenham initially, and it would appear that after being with Conrad, she was passed on to Kevin, given he was smitten with her at the time. It just reinforces how much of a mess everything here is. Meanwhile, Jan attends therapy and then messages Alice, the lady from episode 1, to vent about Harry. However, Conrad shows up at her apartment and immediately begins lightly flirting with Alice. This soon turns nasty when she leaves though, as Conrad threatens Jan and reminds her that Harry is family. She's warned off from telling anybody about the marriage, seemingly hinting that she's been tailed while on the walk with Alice. When he leaves, Jan is pretty shook up. Harry receives a call and is asked to meet Richie that night. Before he goes, he heads back home and finds out from Jan that Conrad has been sniffing about. Well, interestingly, Alice is actually working as an undercover officer. She has an in, given Conrad's flirting, but it's a very risky play. Back at the estate, Maeve speaks to Eddie. She reassures him and confidently utters that they've got everyone exactly where we want them. We get confirmation here that Eddie did stab Tommy, and Maeve is working as the puppet master. They also apparently have something else planned too. That night, Harry shows up to see Bella, dropping off the memory stick and the copy. Bella's not about to back off from the deal though, and rings Antoine to set everything up. When Harry leaves, he passes Kevin on the stairwell. Things are frosty between Bella and Kevin, Kevin, with forced affection and doubt starting to creep in. In the car afterwards, we get confirmation that Kevin does know who this prison guard is. The guy used to abuse Kevin badly, but while the implication is that it may have been sexual, hence why he lied to Harry and shrugged it off, that's not confirmed just yet. Harry shows up to see Richie next. Valjean is still alive and he brings Harry in to stab the guy repeatedly. He does so without hesitation and even offers to clean up the mess. It would appear that Richie has bought the whole story about the club owner, but this isn't the end of it. He wants the Harrigans to attend Tommy's funeral, which is where episode 4 of Mobland comes to an end. Episode 5 of Mobland starts with Kevin and Harry discussing Richie's play to have the family attend the funeral and wake. They know it's a trap, but their hands are tied and there's not much they can do here. The conversation then turns to Rusby. Kevin does remember him after all, especially as it turns out he was sexually assaulted back during his days in prison. Kevin doesn't say this out loud, but Harry does reveal where he is. Before they act on this though, Conrad brings them over to the Cotswolds for a council of war. On the way, Jan is shocked when she finds out they need to attend Tommy's funeral. Even she knows that this seems like a trap, but when she finds out Bella is going too, she soon changes her tune and agrees to go. At the council, Harry begrudgingly admits that this is a genius move on Richie's part. Whether they go or not, they're kind of screwed. Kevin believes that nothing will happen at the funeral and wake, but it's more for a show of power. Richie clearly wants to humiliate the Harrigans, and given he's grief-stricken and angry, they'd be walking into enemy territory completely unarmed. If they go, they need to be careful and not drink too much, especially Eddie. We've seen exactly what he gets like when he drinks too much. Furthermore, Harry has a contingency plan and intends to smuggle in some hardware, so they've at least got something to fall back on should everything turn sideways. The long and short of it here is that they're going to accept the invite. Maeve and Eddie are against Conrad's plan and believes it's a bad idea, but Conrad doesn't listen. However, Harry is the one who manages to broker this deal using one of Richie's goons who happens to be having an affair with Ron. Harry has pictures, courtesy of his phone that he managed to crack with the code 123456. Great password, mate. Anyway, Harry does manage to convince the guy to stash the guns, and there's even some money there to sweeten the deal too. Brendan shows up to see Serafina here and invites her out to dinner. He tries to show off in front of her and reveals some uncut gems too. He has a buyer, but he needs someone to help finance the deal. However, Serafina wants 80% of the commission if they're going to do this. Brendan does his best to try and negotiate, but he's completely out of his depth here. In the midst of all this, Alice rings Jan and asks to meet. It's here she finds out about the funeral and feeds this back to the officers. The funeral then goes ahead and Maeve has already started drinking.
Crazy bitch!
En route, Eddie tries to stir things up between Harry and Kevin, asking whether they can actually be trusted. Either way, the Harrigans show up to this somber affair, but unfortunately Eddie makes a complete arse of himself and continues stirring up trouble, calling Richie by Richard and even trying to kiss Fron on the cheek. During Richie's speech, Maeve keeps whispering in Conrad's ear about how Richie is punking him out by staring a hole through him. Conrad whispers a bit too loudly and tells her to be quiet, but it certainly turns heads from those in attendance. In the middle of the wake, Eddie slips away upstairs. He begins looking through all the different items in Tommy's room, doing coke on the side, and eventually finding himself at the mercy of Harry. He curses out Eddie and makes him back down from his tough demeanour, but back downstairs, Harry finds himself caught in the middle of this, with Richie staring a hole through Conrad. It's Maeve who causes more drama though as she approaches Ron. Ron calls her ugly, in a roundabout way, and Maeve gets back to her drinking, the same drink that's been spiked to keep her from causing trouble. However, before she passes out, she gives Eddie a nod to stir up trouble. He bumps into one of the guys and looks set to fight until Richie steps up and offers for one of his men to drive Eddie home. The entire encounter is super awkward and tense and eventually leads to Conrad and Richie talking in private. It turns out Richie knows who killed Tommy, given the club owner has squeaked, but he doesn't want a war of vengeance, but he does respect that a Harrigan showed up. However, if Eddie shows up anywhere, Richie believes he's fair game, which is the one condition to prevent a massive war from breaking out. We don't see whether Conrad accepts the deal or not, but Maeve is not in a forgiving mood. She rings Paul after waking up from a drug slumber and schemes in the background. Things seem to have calmed down here until Ron gets in a car that morning to drive off to the shops. Unfortunately, as she shuts the door, the car explodes into a huge fireball, killing her outright, which is where episode 5 of Mobland comes to an end. Episode 6 of Mobland starts with the aftermath of Ron's car exploding. Richie is overcome with grief while Donnie speaks to Harry. He's here on behalf of Cat McAllister, but before our titular character can deal with that, word spreads across of the bombing. Gina is picked up right as her psychology exam at school starts, and she's obviously not very happy with her father about this. Harry has more important matters to deal with though, as they all head up to Conrad's estate. Kevin knows that all of this has probably been orchestrated by Maeve, and he confronts her about it. However, Conrad chirps up and admits he's the responsible party here, he's the one who pulled the trigger. They loaded Ron's car up with Semtex as a plan B, but because Richie disrespected him, Conrad decided to kill her anyway. In fact, he's actually quite happy to go to war and is confident they'll have the numbers to win this one out in the end. Kevin is exasperated and reminds his dad that the Mexicans, the ones he wanted to cozy up with, were liaising with Archie, and without him around, they have no way of getting them on their side. This is war though, and Conrad makes it clear that they need to be ready to fight. Richie rings through to Conrad, where Eddie and Conrad both chirp up and antagonize him equally. Kevin can only hold his head in his hands as he and Harry realize that all the hard work to protect the family and preventing a war have gone up in flames. Serafina and Brendan meanwhile aren't up at the estate. Instead, they're off doing their diamond deal in Antwerp. They have a meeting set up with Leonard, the buyer, and both appear to have turned their phones off too. Serafina usually stays at the same hotel, so they at least have some frame of reference to go by, but if Richie finds out first, things could go south very quickly. As for Jan, she speaks to Bella and the pair discuss the difficulties at being the partner stuck in the middle of all this while their husbands fight for the Harrigans. Their lives have constantly been upended and disrupted thanks to this drama, and Jan is at the end of her tether. It doesn't help either that Conrad begins to groom Gina outside, telling her that he'll protect her and attempting to get an in with her. Gina is a smart cookie though and confronts her mum about this afterwards, telling her they need to leave. The chopper shows up in the midst of this just as Harry speaks to Bella and tells her to put a halt on the current drama involving Antoine. Bella agrees to think about it just as Harry takes off for Antwerp. Unfortunately, things do go south as Maeve makes a call to Richie and offers him an olive branch for old time's sake. Maeve allows him to kill Serafina but keep Brendan alive in exchange for intel over where they're currently located. Richie goes for it, but he also decides to ring the Mexicans afterwards, seemingly brokering a deal with them. Harry makes it to Antwerp and gets access to Serafina's room at the hotel. When he tries to ring through to her, Brendan answers the phone first and shuts Harry down, refusing to hand the phone over or back out of this deal. For Brendan, he's willing to jeopardize everything just for a sniff of respect from the family. Serafina senses something is up, not just from the preliminary meeting with Leonard, but also over how jittery her brother is en route to the warehouse. Without him seeing, she shares her location with Harry. This happens to be a warehouse where they go ahead with this diamond deal. Everything seems to be legit, but things soon go awry as the exchange occurs, with gunshots raining down across the building. Armed guards show up and kill most of those in the room, and the whole affair is a complete shambles, as Brendan and Serafina are both held at gunpoint. Before any of the men can pull the trigger, we cut to black, which is where episode 6 comes to an end. Episode 7 of Mobland begins with Harry showing up at the warehouse. It's abandoned, littered with dead bodies, with the word war scrawled on the floor in blood. There's no sign of Serafina or Brendan, while the dead soldiers appear to be part of a larger cartel group that control the Antwerp docks. This happens to be Richie's doing, and when Maeve finds out that he's taken Brendan as insurance, she threatens him. It falls on deaf ears though, and Richie simply hangs up on her. Elsewhere, Kevin and Conrad discuss the current nuclear war they're dealing with, and try to determine who could have ratted them out. They still haven't sussed that it's Maeve, but will they before the season's up? Conrad does not take kindly to moles, especially when he tells a rather gnarly story about what he did to the last one back in 1988. Alice rings Jan asking for a favour here, and all the while she's obviously unaware that Alice is a police informant. Jan leaves the property, but she's followed by Conrad's men as she shows at a pub. However, Alice also has her crew outside as well, armed with listening devices to catch what they're saying, as Jan discusses how Harry is away on business. When Alice pries further, mentioning killers and gangsters, Conrad's man Paul shows up and breaks this charade before things turn messy. He warns Alice from pursuing this line of inquiry and drives Jan home. On the way, Paul questions Jan about what she may have divulged, but she keeps a level head. Bella speaks to Antoine and wants to work with him, having gained a meeting with the Home Secretary. After Harry chewed him out and took back the USB drive though, he's less than enthused about helping. Bella does sweeten the deal though by offering a 20% cut eventually, but things are tenuous to say the least, especially as she spies Kevin outside making a call of his own. This time is to locate the care home that the abusive guard Rigby is staying at. Kevin is not far away from Eddie though, who wanders around the grounds with Gina, and they discuss how they both feel a bit lost. Of course, this is just Eddie's way of trying to get into her pants through something Gina refers to as mirroring. After being called out for it though, the pair do actually hook up. While this is going on, Harry tracks down the UFC boss, heading into their base and single-handedly taking out a ton of guards. A big shootout ensues around the warehouse, with Harry using grenades and cover to systematically work his way through, determined to get some answers. Back at the Cotswolds, Maeve admits to Conrad that she's received a message from Richie confirming that he has the kids. Conrad wants to see the text though, but of course, given she's made it up, Maeve doesn't have it. Maeve continues to walk a fine line here, and she gets her get out of jail free card just after when Harry rings through. He's found out that a Lopez cartel currently have the two in their custody and they're working with Richie. The only man who could have potentially got them out of this sticky situation is Archie, and with him dead, the liaison the Harrigans would have had is now gone. We soon find out that Brendan and Serafina are still alive, but they're both tied up in an empty warehouse alone. Brendan is not doing well and is losing his grip. Contrasting that though, Serafina tries to remain calm and work her way through this methodically, realizing that Brendan is actually not to blame, not least because of his very genuine reaction to how everything has gone down. She soon realizes that Richie is the one behind this, given both sides have been killed in a diamond deal. Brendan refuses to believe this is real until a man arrives with a tablet and a whole bunch of tools, including a chainsaw. Jaime Lopez is the big boss here, the leader of this Lopez cartel, and wants to get to work on the pair. Serafina tries to talk her way out of this situation, offering double what Richie is paying. Jaime refuses to go for it though, pointing out Conrad is a madman and not the leader he once was. Furthermore, there's certainly no love lost between him and his father, especially after Conrad threw out some pretty vicious slurs in the past, which has done his reputation absolutely no favours. Like clockwork, Richie rings and sets up a conference call with the Harrigans, as Kevin, Conrad and Maeve are forced to watch as Jaime and his men get the chainsaw out and absolutely obliterate Brendan. For obvious reasons, I'm not about to show that on YouTube. Before Serafina can suffer the same fate though, the call cuts out completely. It turns out Harry has managed to make some calls of his own, just in time to stop the execution. He managed to talk to someone called Kat, who's seemingly very powerful, and as a result of this, he now owes her a favour, which is where episode 7 of Mobland comes to an end. Episode 8 of Mobland begins with Conrad and Maeve reflecting on Brendan's birth and the dreams they had for the boy. All of that has come crashing down now that he's been acquainted with the wrong side of a chainsaw. Serafina is still in a state of shock, but she's dropped off with Harry, while Kat now owes Jaime Lopez a big favour for sparing her life. Harry returns to the estate with Serafina, with Maeve watching on disapprovingly from the window upstairs. Serafina reflects on what happened with the deal, going on to admit to the family that she tried to strike a deal for the family's benefit. Conrad reassures her there's nothing she could have done differently, and out of everybody he blames Richie for this. Maeve shows up in the middle of this and is strangely empathetic to Serafina, even giving her a hug and reassuring that she is a Harrigan given she tried to save Brendan's life. She also promises that they're going to avenge his death. When the ladies leave the room, Harry admits to Conrad that he had to strike a deal with Kat McAllister to get Serafina out. Conrad isn't exactly happy and he questions Harry over how he knows Kat, but he keeps his cards close to his chest. The only thing he reveals is that he was approached 2 years back to switch over and work with her, but he refused. After what's happened, Conrad is going to move Eddie, Bella and Kevin to a safe house, but interestingly he's keeping Gina and Jan at the estate. Conrad gets straight back to business though, wanting intel on the fentanyl and the ties with Jaime Lopez, wanting Harry to organise a sit down with him. Kevin is incredulous when he finds out the extent of this, and it's definitely eyebrow raising. Conrad not only wants to try and broker a deal with the man who just killed Brendan, but also bring in Kat's security detail to beef the place up to make sure nothing untoward goes down. Harry's dilemma continues though when Jan tells him about the extent of Eddie's ties with Gina. Eddie talks a big game to Harry when he shows up in the bedroom to confront him, but he's taken aback by Harry's chilling calmness. Harry actually promises to give his blessing and support this relationship with Gina, but he also reassures Eddie that one day, when he's least expecting it and he's at the top of the mountain, he'll be there to push him off. This certainly wipes a smile off this cocky guy's face. Harry's words with Gina don't have the same effect when he tells her about Eddie's murderous capabilities. Gina shrugs it off though, pointing out that she's just choosing a guy similar to her father's traits. Meanwhile, Alice's Oscar performance last episode has brought in former Deputy Chief Inspector Colin Tattersall to assist the police over how to break the Harrigan family. He spent 30 years in the business and now he's a freelancer. Colin doesn't like their current idea of going after Jan and believes that a family with tentacles as long as the Harrigans can't be broken in that manner. Instead, he believes they should go after Richie and work with him. Back at the estate, with Harry leaving for London, Conrad speaks to Jan and demands she call Alice. Conrad wants her to come down for dinner, and he continues his scheming afterwards, speaking to Bella and essentially telling her to spy on Kevin. Maeve is still here too, similarly scheming away, and after giving Serafina sleeping pills, immediately speaks to Kevin and reveals that Serafina, just before dozing off, claimed that she's number one in the family. Kevin ignores Maeve's spinning as he has bigger fish to fry. He heads on down to the nursing home and finds the address Rusby is staying in from the visitor's book. En route to this organised meet, Harry speaks to Freddie and tells him that the king is dead. He knows that Conrad isn't in charge and that Maeve is the one pulling the strings here. When Freddie wants out, Harry brings up how that's not a great idea. Harry continues on, revealing that he and Kevin are going to organise a coup and take the family over and make sure Richie is out the picture in the process too. Whether this is actually true or just a way to loosen Freddie's lips is still unclear at this point, but we do get confirmation that Archie is clean and definitely not the mole. Freddie knows who the real mole is working against them, but we don't find out who that person is right now. Instead, Harry throws Freddie off the roof and leaves to speak to Kat. Kat agrees to Conrad's terms, but makes it clear that she's doing this for Harry, who now owes her 2 favours. Meanwhile, Fisk, Mukasa and Colin show up to see Richie, bringing up how they want to take down the entire Harrigan operation, but they need help to give it a bit of a push. In exchange, Richie will get full immunity, plus 10 years from the date Conrad is convicted. However, the police make it clear that they own him, which certainly isn't going to fly with Richie. He takes a gun and shoots both Fisk and Mukasa, killing them both outright. Colin though sits in the wings and reassures Richie that yes, he's the one who owns the police. Hearing this, Richie agrees to their deal, which is where episode 8 of Mobland comes to an end. Episode 9 of Mobland starts with Eddie waking up to find Conrad lurking in his room. He wants to have a chat, but we don't see the full extent of this until later in the chapter. One thing's for sure though, it's not good news. Off the back of this, Eddie ignores Jan in the kitchen and heads outside with a coffee, asking the dog who's better off here. This is of course a metaphor for his own life, where he feels trapped in a cage and used as a pet for the Harrigans. Elsewhere, Kevin has gone AWOL, determined to get revenge on Rusby for the abuse he suffered back in prison. He plays the role of a taxi driver, taking the guy back home. Kevin manages to work his way into Rusby's house and eventually confronts him about the abuse. Rusby has had bad memory loss over the years, and anything beyond 5 years back is a bit hazy. That doesn't really help Kevin get closure, who has been haunted by this abuse all season long. Rusby does eventually apologise after questioning if he actually imagined the whole thing, and tells him that he's found Jesus. This is enough for Kevin to get his gun out and, after breaking down crying, shoots the guy in the head. Conrad works with Harry to try and sort out an alliance with Jaime. Conrad is a bit of a loose cannon and jokes about putting a Tommy gun in the bathroom before the meet, and it's hard to know if the guy is joking or not. Apparently he is, but either way, this doesn't look like it's going to be a particularly pleasant meet. First impressions are not great either. Serafina is here to try and smooth things over and gets down to business in order to make a deal. Jaime has his own reasons for being here, and he speaks plainly to Harry, ignoring Conrad completely and bringing up how the earlier favour was for Kat, not for him. Conrad gives him 4 hours to come to a decision, but Jaime simply looks over at Harry and tells him he can understand why he wants to leave the Harrigans. This gets right under Conrad's skin back home, which isn't helped when Maeve questions him about Alice coming to dinner, warning him off doing anything silly. Alice though is actually buzzing given her undercover escapades. After the murder of those 2 officers last time out, Colin is now in charge of the case and he recognises this excitement in Alice. He speaks to her plainly about how she's a risk taker like him and encourages her to try and plant evidence at the Harrigan house in exchange for securing a big promotion and a nice payday. Back at the estate, Maeve speaks to Gina and demands she leave Eddie alone. She threatens her badly, scathingly growling that she'll eat her eyeballs, and scares Gina into running away. Bella meets with Antoine and organises traffic here with the Home Secretary. As the group begin talking, we can see that Antoine is wearing a camera on his tie. Something big is about to go down, and it actually comes from this dinner at the Harrigan estate. Colin has bugged Alice's phone and speaks to Richie about the current plan, including a tactical team nearby ready to swoop in as soon as Alice has planted the evidence. Richie agrees that Harry is unhappy and it seems like he's not going to get caught in the crossfire here, which is at least something. Now Jaime agrees to the Harrigan deal, but only after confirmation that Harry has got the rat out of the house. Harry knows who this is and works to resolve the situation before it gets messy. He also has to meet Kat the following day at 5 PM in order to make good on his favour. The dinner goes ahead that night, minus Gina who's not feeling well. Maeve is a complete loose cannon and speaks about the fragility of marriage, likening it to an egg. It's also worth noting that she she grabs Eddie's thigh here, who looks very uncomfortable. As for Serafina, she gets right to the crux of the issue. She questions Alice's motives and why she's not feeling a bit scared given exactly where she is. But it's Maeve who forces Alice's uncomfortableness to fly off the Richter scale and leave the table. Then everything kicks off. Conrad questions Maeve and things get hostile between them, while Harry slips away and catches up to Alice, who's busy bagging up evidence to plant across the house. The facade slips here as Alice knows the game is up. She reveals what's happening and Harry lets her go. He doesn't tell Conrad either, as he and Maeve wind up at loggerheads until the police show up. Maeve and Conrad are both arrested, although they wind up singing as they're taken out, laughing all the while as they're bundled into police cars, which is where episode 9 of Mobland comes to an end. Episode 10 of Mobland begins with Kevin surrounded by spatters of blood while he rants to Rusby's dead body about his messy life. He's known about Bella and her connection to Conrad for a while, along with the truth about Eddie's parentage. It's here we get confirmation that Eddie's father is Conrad, not Kevin. He's tried hard to keep everything together, but it's all become too much for him and something had to give. Harry shows up and reunites with Kevin while he brings his guys in to clean the place up and dispose of Rusby's body. They eventually drive down to the dock where Harry is waiting for O'Hara. It turns out she's the real mole of the family. She's been working with Richie for over a year, topped up on fentanyl and whispering secrets to the enemy. Through her answers, Harry realises she's not the only one giving Richie info, given she never mentioned the situation involving Archie or what went down in Antwerp. Richie does trust her though, so Harry decides to use that to get to him and end this war before it's too late. Harry lets her go and promises to call her, leaving O'Hara dumbfounded as she walks away. With Conrad and Maeve in prison, it's coming down to crunch time. One of these families, the Harrigans or the Stevensons, could well be running the entire game when this is all said and done, so they need to move quickly. Kevin shows up to see Conrad while he's behind bars and tells him O'Hara is their rat. He also goes on to tell Conrad that he's making big changes and is going to reshape the Harrigan name in his own image as head of the family. Conrad scoffs and jokes about, but Kevin is being deadly serious here. At the same time, Maeve speaks to Eddie and encourages him to kill Harry, then go after Serafina. From behind this glass, she has far less influence than before, but her tongue is still razor sharp. When she suggests that she and Eddie be king and queen, she reveals that Conrad is his real father. Eddie heads back to see Bella next and after cursing his mum out, demands that he be taken seriously and not lied to anymore. Now, interestingly, this chat occurs just after Bella checks the news, where her father is reeling after recordings of his illicit dealings have been made public. Bella apologises to Eddie for what happened with Conrad, but unfortunately Eddie has heard enough. He takes inspiration from Joaquin Phoenix's performance in Gladiator and squeezes his mum and chokes her out. He almost kills her while they embrace, until Harry's guys stop him with a swift punch to the gut. Meanwhile, Kat phones Serafina and suggests they broker a deal together and discuss the future. Serafina is actually interested to hear more, while Alice and Colin close out their deal with a catch. Colin double crosses Alice and has his men drug her and take her away, working with Richie and giving him the all clear to press ahead. It seems like everything has been resolved from Richie's perspective, but there's a wildcard here. Harry rings O'Hara and gives her a plan to follow. It's quite straightforward and involves Richie believing he's in charge, when in reality he's playing right into Kevin and Harry's hands. Now Richie's men show up at O'Hara's office waiting for Harry, but without Paul O'Donnell. He hangs back and eventually hits the trigger, blowing the office up and all of Richie's men with it. Another group arrive at the safe house who are also hit, with the remaining Harrigans rushing through the woods. As for Harry and Kevin, they show up at Richie's bar, where Kevin certainly doesn't hesitate, shooting O'Hara and then Richie. Harry and Kevin also uncover the recording of the planted evidence from inside Alice's car, which Kevin and Harry can use to get Conrad and Maeve out. They intend to let them hang for a bit first, while Colin shows up with the police at Richie's pub and sees the devastation for himself. Next, Harry shows up to see Kat, who makes him an offer. She wants to take out all the Harrigans in one fell swoop and needs his intel to make that happen. If he doesn't play ball, then Kat will end up an enemy. Harry tells her to go fuck herself and walks away, loyal to the Harrigans until the end. Back at the Harrigan estate, Bella speaks to Kevin about the future. He wants her by his side and she goes on to admit she's known about his nightmares and the ordeal inside the prison for a long time. He talks in his sleep and she's put the pieces together, and Bella understands what he's going through. She admits here that her father raped her for years as a child, going some way to explain exactly why she wanted to take revenge on him. Bella promises to be by his side, and this heart-to-heart works well to solidify their ties together. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Harry and Jan. It's far less warm than a reunion we just saw between Bella and Kevin, as they wind up arguing together about the future and what's been happening. Jan lashes out with the knife and winds up stabbing him right in the chest. Harry shrugs it off and sits down, with the knife still sticking into his chest, joking that she has his full attention now. As for Conrad, he's the big man in campus at a prison, and as the episode comes to an end, he revels in the applause as he looks set to reclaim his empire, bringing this tumultuous season to an end. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.